What is driving for dollars?
Driving for dollars is the very best way to find real estate deals. You're going to actually physically drive around neighborhoods and look for houses that look run down.
Are there any other things that somebody should be looking for when driving for dollars?
Some others that are pretty common is if the mailbox is full. Somebody's not living there, something's not quite right. This house has a window AC unit, or if it has a really old handicap ramp, that could also be a very good sign that they might need to sell soon.
How does your company make the driving for dollars process simpler?
Is because as soon as you see that house, you can pin it, know who owns it, and start mail to that owner right when you're in front of the house. So you don't have to remember to do it later, and you don't have to have a lot of leads to send mail to that house. You can do it right there.
Hi, everybody. Jose Luis Morales here. Welcome back to another episode of the Residual Real Estate Agent Show. Today, we've got a very special guest. His name is David Lecko. He is the CEO and founder of a company called DealMachine. Today, David is going to be educating us on a topic called driving for dollars and how his company can help you drive for dollars more efficiently. The reason I wanted to do this episode is one of the common questions I get all the time is, Jose, how do I find a good deal? Jose, how do I find a motivated seller? This is oftentimes one of the most overlooked ways of doing it. And David and his company have a systematic approach to be able to drive for dollars very efficiently and profitably. Welcome to the show, David. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Glad to be here and glad to talk about great real estate deals.
Awesome, bro. Yeah. Anytime we can talk real estate, I love it. So if you wouldn't mind just saying who is David Lecko and how did you get involved in this wonderful world of real estate? And then we'll transition over to the driving for dollars.
Of course. Yeah. So my name's David Lecko. I'm the CEO of DealMachine, and I got started back in 2016 when I really wanted more freedom in my life than my W-2 job had. I went looking for rental properties. I missed out on what would have been a really awesome deal while I was looking for rundown houses and trying to get in touch with them, because I had written down the house, but I hadn't gotten in touch with the owner, and somebody else bought it before I had the chance to follow up with them. I made a tool for myself to help me automate that follow up right when I was in front of the house to get in touch with the owner. And I felt really terrible about missing that deal because I was like, I put in so much work and I still didn't get it. But the change in mindset happened whenever I realized, well, there's not a tool to help implement this common advice, driving for dollars. So I felt a whole lot better about the opportunity when I realized I could make a tool that would help me forget less. And I ended up getting, 6 deals like that in the following year and a half by driving for dollars with the tool that I made that ended up becoming DealMachine and a tool that other people can use.
So for our viewers, David, who don't know what driving for dollars means, because it's got a pretty catchy name, driving for dollars. What is driving for dollars?
Driving for dollars is the very best way to find real estate deals. You're going to actually physically drive around neighborhoods and look for houses that look run down, or maybe they've got tall grass or something doesn't look quite right. They look worse than the rest of the houses in that neighborhood. And then you write it down, you look up who owns the house, and then you reach out to the owner asking if they'd like an offer on their house. And so that's driving for dollars. You're building your own marketing list.
And then okay, I'm driving for dollars. I see houses that need some work. Is that typically what I'm looking for? Am I looking for houses that need work? And if so, are there certain type of houses, like maybe if I don't have a lot of money at the beginning and I want to build like a very specific list, is there something I should be looking out for? And then as I begin to get more deal flow, is there a way to kind of expand what I'm looking for as well too?
So driving for dollars is a great way to start out, find your first deal, but you can also expand what you're doing, because once you do a few deals, your time is worth more than what you can pay to have somebody drive around for those properties for you. And we can get into that. But that's the great thing about driving for dollars is it typically gives you the best bang for your buck. You can't buy that list, right? You've got to actually build that list, and nobody else has it. So that makes it cheaper to go find those types of deals. But then you can also hire drivers and expand the number of deals that you're doing from driving for dollars.
So here's one thing that I hear from other people, and I haven't really I'm glad that I'm talking to you because I would imagine that you know driving for dollars better than most people. I hear that you should look for houses that are boarded up. I hear that you should look for houses that looks like it has roofing problems. Obviously, tall grass is another thing that you should look for. Are there any other things that somebody should be looking for when driving for dollars, or any other indicators that show somewhat of a distressed property?
You named some of the really, really common ones. Some others that are pretty common is if the mailbox is full, somebody's not living there, something's not quite right. But there's also some ones that are kind of niche and a lot of people don't know. And so if this house has a window AC unit, or if it has a really old handicap ramp, that could also be a very good sign that they might need to sell soon. Or if it's in a snowy climate, but everyone has gotten out of their house, but this house has no tire tracks. So those are all three things. And the fourth thing is maybe it's trash day and everyone's trash can is out by the street, but this house isn't. And then a few other things I'll throw in there. If you're in kind of like a nicer neighborhood and somebody's bushes just look unkept, definitely add that type of house. Or if the neighborhood is looking pretty good, but this one house has mold on the side of the house, and you could tell that it doesn't look quite right, the same as the other ones, that's another good sign. Or maybe their gutter's falling off, or there's peeling paint. And there's just sometimes a feeling you get when you're looking at this house and you're like, man, this one just doesn't look as good as the rest in the neighborhood. Then you can add those types of properties. And that's exactly what you're looking for when you're driving for dollars.
Is there any one from all your clients that has performed better than others, just out of curiosity? I would imagine that the boarded up window one, because that's the one that we found, it was boarded up. That one was actually a really good opportunity and the owner just wanted to sell. Is there one? And it was funny because I didn't know about the trash day, the wheelchair. I didn't know about those two, which was interesting to me. Is there one that performs better than others just based on feedback?
This is like a point that a lot of people forget or miss. Is they'll typically only look for the driving for dollars houses that qualify, as we just mentioned, with any one of those factors. But if it's a absentee owner property, they'll put it on their list. If it's owner occupied, they will mistakenly leave it off the list. And what I'd like to encourage people is just pay no attention to who owns the property. But if it just meets any of these criteria, you definitely want to add it to your list. Because for me, I've actually done more deals that are owner occupied than absentee owned. And so I definitely wouldn't want people to neglect something just because it's owner occupied. And I think people just get a little bit mixed up because a lot of the common advice, if you're going to buy a list, is to buy the absentee owner list. But when you're looking for the distressed houses, any sign of distress is something that you should be adding.
Now, without your app, if somebody's basically driving for dollars, they would be driving around, they'd find these properties, they'd probably write down the address to the property, then go back to the office, maybe look up that address, and then maybe skip trace it to find a phone number, and then maybe add them to some sort of mailing list. How does your company make the driving for dollars process simpler? And then we'll jump into the driving for dollars, what I call on steroids, which is the virtual driving for dollars as well too.
Oh yeah, the virtual one's going to be a big hit. So for me, I was writing down addresses on a piece of paper and I was not following up, right? Because that piece of paper was in my car and I would get home and I'd cook dinner and I'd go to bed and then I'd go driving for dollars the next day and I just add more properties to my piece of paper. At the time, you could only send mail that you hand wrote yourself, or you had to have a minimum order of like 200. So I was building up my list to get to 200 so I could send mail for the first time. Well, it took me weeks to actually build my list up to 200. And so by the time I reached 200, somebody already bought one of those houses on my list. And so the speed of follow-up with a one-off is really important, and a way that DealMachine helps is because as soon as you see that house, you can pin it, know who owns it, and start mail to that owner right when you're in front of the house. So you don't have to remember to do it later, and you don't have to have a lot of leads to send mail to that house. You can do it right there. There's a few other ways that the app helps too, and one of those is route tracking. One of the things that I learned when I was driving around my neighborhood is I was learning the neighborhoods, but sometimes if I was switched back and forth between streets and they didn't line up perfectly, I might miss a street. And so that helped me look back and see that I fully covered an entire area before moving on to the next. So that was another way that the app really helped me out.
Just to make sure that you didn't miss anything. So basically when you drive by the neighborhood, it almost marks it as you did. And if you miss anything, then it'll also let you know. Can you look phone numbers up on the app as well too?
Yeah, of course. You could actually, right when you're in front of the house, you could press a button to get their phone number, and you could call it or text it and have a conversation with them right there on the spot.
That's unbelievable right there, right? Because otherwise you'd have to go look it up on a separate app, and you have it all in one application as well too. If there's any viewers out there that are seeing value with this and would like to get connected to DealMachine, I actually have an affiliate code for you guys. It's called drivingfordollar123.com, and it'll actually take you to the affiliate link that I have, and that'll be a way to kind of get connected with DealMachine. The other thing I did want to ask you is, what about driving for dollars virtually? Like, what is that? How does it work?
I'm really glad you asked, because a lot of people who are just starting out have jobs during the daylight hours. So they can't actually drive for dollars because their job has them tied up whenever they could be driving around and see properties in the daylight. So driving for dollars is a function inside of the app where you can virtually go through something very similar to Google Street View, and you can actually add properties from that view. So you're virtually driving through, you click, yes, this house looks run down, and it will add it to your system, and you can send mail that way. So you can surf that from your mobile device or from your desktop computer, which is especially helpful if your only free time is at night. A big thing for that is the route tracking works on the virtual too, because that's actually easier to even get mixed up because you're not physically there. And the route tracking will tell you what areas you've covered.
So not only that, but I like now with that we live in a virtual world, you can even hire somebody to do it for you. Like you can hire a virtual assistant from somewhere else, tell them what you're looking for in terms of criteria, and they could virtually drive for dollars at, let's say, $4 or $5 an hour versus you having to get in your car and drive for dollars at $5, $6, $7 a gallon of gas. Now, the only concern that I would have with the driving for dollars virtually is that if there's a distressed house, like how do we quality control for accuracy? Meaning, like, how do we know that the Google Street View is not like 10 years old and that house has already been resold 10, 20, 30 different times?
So when you're in the metaverse driving around the Google Street View images, it says in the bottom left how old the image is, when it was last updated. So that's how you know. And in major cities, they update it about once a year. So it's not as fresh as going out there in person. You know, if you can go out there in person, you know, definitely do that. But virtual is an amazing option if gas is $7 in your area, or if you work during the day and you don't have time to check them out at night during the daylight.
And then as it relates to the virtual option of driving for dollars, before you add it, you can also check if the property is sold. Like let's say that it says 2000, that the image was last updated in 2005, and then it says that it sold in 2007. Does it give you that type of information? That way you know maybe not to add it if it already sold in 2007 and the image was last updated maybe in 2005 as well. Does it basically show you the records of when it was last traded, basically?
Yeah, we give you all the information about when it was last traded. Even in non-disclosure states, we provide and have access to the MLS data inside of the app, so you can tell when it was sold for. And I think that's really smart to compare it to the date that you see inside the virtual driving for dollars world that you're looking at.
So let's say that I find a house, either virtually or in person, and I get a hold of the owner and I actually decide to call them. What are some scripts? Do you guys have some scripts that maybe viewers can utilize, or what would be like maybe like an opening conversation that somebody can maybe reach out to the owner with?
We do have scripts, but honestly, you can get by without a script and it comes off way more natural, and you don't have to be an expert and know the answer to all the questions. I mean, that's the biggest piece of advice that I would give somebody when they're thinking about pressing that call button, is to just press the call button and just be okay knowing that you don't have to know all the answers. And if they ask you something you don't know, you can always say, hey, I don't know that, but I'll get back to you as soon as possible with the answer. But the way I'd open the phone call is, asking them if they're the owner of 1239 Park Avenue. And they say, yes, I am, or no, but I think that's my brother's house. And it'd be like, great. Hey, I'm out here. I'm a local property owner, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in receiving a no obligation cash offer on your property. And they'll say yes or no. And from there, you can ask a few other follow-up questions, but the opening can be as simple as that. How about you? Do you guys use a special opener whenever you call people?
No, I think it's just the thing is just keeping it simple, you know? Like I think what you just said is right on. Like, hey, I'm looking for the owner of 123 Banana Street, or hey, I'm looking for David. David Jose Morales. I own a couple of properties in the area. I'm interested in buying your property. Would you consider selling it? Just as simple as that. You know, I think the main thing is just getting over the hump and actually doing it. Now, for some people, they don't enjoy making phone calls. I don't know if I enjoy it, but I know that that's a very effective way of operating, because sometimes when you send a mailer, you could be sending a mailer and the owner could answer your phone call and say, hey, look, I'm not selling for 30 years. And at that point, there's probably not in your best interest to continue mailing to them. Is there one that works better than others, like mail, text, or phone call, that gets your clients better results?
It's all about how much time you got. So we provide guidance that, like, if you're in a market like Indianapolis, Indiana, you need to add at least 300 properties as soon as possible, and then reach out to each of them 3 times, over the course of like a few months. So if you're working 12-hour days, you've got a little time every day to add properties. You probably want to focus on adding the properties, because calling takes time, and sending mail, because sending mail takes no time. Does that make sense? So it just depends on how much money you have to spend versus how much time you have. If you've got all the time in the world and zero budget, calling is going to be your best option. If you've got a little budget and you got some time, I'd probably spend it finding the properties, so that way you can send the mail and focus on continuing to find more properties. Because if you're actually only going to find 50 properties but call all of them, versus find like 250 properties and send mail to all of them, I'd prefer the second option a lot better. Your chances of getting a deal are a lot more likely when you're able to bump those numbers up on how many properties that you're adding.
I love that response, because that really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Here's a few things that people commonly ask. How much money is this going to take me to get a deal? So building on top of the example in Indianapolis, Indiana, I just gave you, if you go to a very high price market like California, someplace in California, where the price of the house is like eight times higher probably than Indianapolis, you probably need to add 8 times as many properties. So instead of 300 properties to get a deal, you probably need to add like 1,500 properties to get a deal. And so that's going to take more time and it's going to take some more money, but you're going to actually have a bigger payday, because the price of the house is a lot larger. The percentage of your profit is going to stay the same, but the dollars of your profit will be a lot larger as well. Does that make sense? So it's like more investment in a higher price market to get the deal, but you actually get a bigger payoff as well. So that's something to think about depending on where you're at between someplace in California and Indianapolis. Let's say you're in Atlanta. That's probably somewhere in the middle of those price ranges. So you probably need to find like 800 properties and send mail at least 3 times to get a deal there. And so that's an answer to the common question of like, how much money do I need? How much time does it take to get a deal? And that's the best way I found to answer the question based on the market that you're in.
If I was going to do a mailer, can you set it up so that it's like a custom frequency, meaning like once a month, once every other month, or is it just like a one-time type of mail? And how does that process work?
So it definitely defaults to frequently mailing the person every 21 days, which I would recommend doing for at least, any sales advice says it's like an average of 10 touch points to go ahead and get that deal. So you definitely want to do that for at least a good like 6 times plus before you kind of pull back and do it less frequently. I will say this, 80+% of deals come after the first postcard. So if you're only sending one, you're not really getting the full benefit of the efforts you took to build the list in the first place. Is you need to make sure you're reaching out to them multiple times. The house has been distressed for quite a while. So just because you found it doesn't mean they want to sell it then, but because it's distressed, it means it's highly likely they'll need to sell it in the future. You just need to time your communication with them, at the same time that they want to sell it. And the only way to do that is continue to reach out.
And what about the text message? Is that like a campaign, or is that just like a one-off? And can you do it multiple times after you've reached out to them?
So we offer an ability for you to call or text from your mobile device straight to the person. If you wanted to mass text somebody, you'd be able to export your list of phone numbers and owners from DealMachine, and then you could upload that into a different texting platform.
Anything else that you think people should know about driving for dollars?
Yes, you got to not give up too soon. That's like the biggest hurdle that people get over, is they get really excited They add 20 properties. They don't get any calls back or any positive feedback on the phone, and they give up way too soon. So talk to people in your market. We've got a Facebook group where you can ask questions like, well, how many people are in my city, trying to get these types of results? Or go to a meetup and talk to somebody who does real estate deals and can give you an idea of like they spend $2,000, to get a deal, or $3,000 to get a deal in that market. And then use that as a guideline and commit to doing what it takes, rather than letting your emotions control your decision and give up too soon, and basically wasting all your efforts in the first place. So taking the emotion out of the decision and focusing on the data that you can gather from talking to people in your market is my best advice for somebody starting out.
Not only that, but it also only takes one big win, like we got lucky where the first house that we literally called, it was a house that was completely boarded up. And right now we're in negotiations with the owner, but it was literally the first house that we saw. And we happened to reach out to them. They're like, yeah, we're selling right now. But I'm aware it very rarely happens like that. It very rarely happens where you catch the right person, the person's ready to sell right now, but they're out there. It just kind of proof that it is out there. So for all of our viewers, I just want to remind you guys that if you guys do want to get involved with DealMachine and you do want to get started on driving for dollars, a good way to do it would just be to just visit drivingfordollars123.com. David, anything else?
Yeah. We need to talk about pouring gasoline on the fire. If you've gotten a few deals, there's a way for you to recruit drivers, because you had mentioned that earlier. So I think we need to just touch on that real quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Have you ever done that?
No, I've never actually done that, but I have a guy that puts our open house signs. And then because I'm a retail agent, but during the time that he's doing the open house signs, he kind of just hangs out. And I was thinking that during that time, he can basically be driving and finding deals. But so explain that to us.
You can hire a driver in Indianapolis or in any market, really, if you just pay him $5 over what an Amazon driver would be actually making. So you can Google Amazon driver jobs and you can see what they've posted that job for. So in Indianapolis, last time I checked, it was like $15. Amazon provides the vehicle, Amazon provides the gas, but my drivers get $20 an hour, which is $5 over that. They provide their own gas and vehicle, but they're actually still just kind of like mentally preferring to make more money than an Amazon driver. And plus, they get to actually pick their own hours compared to Amazon, which is pretty rigid in most cases. So that would be my tip if you're going to hire somebody. If you've done a few deals and your time is now worth more than $20 an hour, that's when it's time to go hire a driver. So that would be two pieces of advice. We've ironed out quite a bit of the process. And if you're curious about that, we can definitely give you some free resources on like, what's the job posting? What's the hiring process? What's the payment structure? How do you make sure they're doing their job and not just eating churros and adding properties from their couch instead of actually getting out there and driving like you're paying them for? The route tracking is really helpful for that. But we've got those kind of resources that we'd be glad to share with anybody. There's like a chat feature there. And you could ask for that and we'll hook you guys up.
What I wanted to ask you is once you get, like, let's say that I actually get really ambitious about this and I drive the entire city or the entire county, how often do you recommend updating the list? Is this like a one-time type of thing, or is this something that...
Yeah, so the route tracking that we have set up is color-coded. So if you've driven there between 1 and 3 months, it's green. Between 3 and 6 months, it's red. And then from 6 months to a year, well, actually after a year, it goes away. So it's green from 0 to 3, it's yellow from 3 to 6, and then from 6 to 12 months, it's red. And then after a year, that route goes away. So I would recommend redriving the area whenever it turns red, because things can happen that are very important. Like one property that I bought had a tree fall on the house, and the tree sat there for a month. And I tracked down the owner and let her know that this tree fell on her house. She ended up selling me her house, but that tree only fell like a month earlier. So things can happen to houses that damage them and make them look run down within a few months, So it's best practice that I've implemented is to redrive the area after 6 months. And that's why the route turned red in that time frame on DealMachine as well.
I almost feel like you guys thought about everything.
We've been doing this since 2017. We have thought about a lot. It was just a tool made for myself, honestly. So I just made everything that I wanted. because that was the strategy I was using.
I appreciate, obviously, you being on the show. I hope that our viewers enjoyed the topic, driving for dollars. For our viewers, this was episode number 125. We had David Lecko. He is the CEO and founder of DealMachine. DealMachine has an app called that is specifically for driving for dollars. If you want to get 43 postcards, go to driving for dollars 123 and you will get that. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate your time. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Really appreciate it.